Hello, and welcome to the search for the weirdest games ever. If it's your first time watching, I've been looking for strange and unusual games for quite a few years, and I say weird with a completely positive connotation, because to me it means the game dares to do something unique and original to stand out of the crowd, whether it's some bold artistic choices or never seen before types of gameplay. It's a reprieve from the mundanity of a fairly homogeneous industry. Or sometimes it can be fun to check things out just for the what the fuck factor. This time I've got multiple games of varying degrees of weirdness, but no clear unifying theme. I guess they're all fairly puzzle focused, but in very different ways from one another. Some of these games are straight out of the oven, while others I've been meaning to talk about for years. So let's not delay any longer and get into it. The first game today is the brand new oceanic point-and-click adventure Panthalassa. I've had the honor to receive an early review copy of the game, but don't worry, that doesn't make my opinion of it biased in any way. If I didn't actually like the game, I wouldn't even bother talking about it here. Panthalassa takes place in a deep-sea scientific structure, and it's essentially a post-humanity story about robots questioning existentialism in a similar vein to something like Primordia, or Nier Automata for non-indie heads, except with a background of researching sea life. I'd still argue that it's closer to Primordia, because you've got the smart and cold main character together with a whimsy and chatty little companion, much like Horatio and Crispin. The player takes the role of a disoriented research unit looking for a way out of the underwater facility, and it's an endeavor that includes plenty of puzzles, strange characters, and at least 20 fish-related factoids. The first thing that immediately stands out about the game is the 90s nostalgia aesthetic. It has those rounded character models and chunky maximalist UI designs. Out of the games I've covered before, it reminds me of Eastern Mind, except with a dash of Hypnospace Outlaw's fake retro PC interfacing. The game has a lot of those retro filters going on, like scan lines, chromatic aberration, screen wobble and so on. Most of them can be toggled off, but I left them on since they didn't bother me. I just hope compression doesn't butcher the visual quality too much, because the game looks very crisp and crunchy. It's less of an authentic 90s look and more of a modern romanticization of it. But I don't mind it, because in this case the modern tech is leveraged quite well. For example, I would really like the smaller details, like the cursor illuminating the UI as it moves in real time. The UI also changes for every area in the game. I especially loved the area that had this meaty looking UI that would actually wobble as you would move the cursor around. Or it would be amusing how the game would utilize some physics elements to swing cables around that you need to plug in into various devices. Otherwise, the game feels like it has some Y2K sensibilities when it comes to the designs. The main companion AI fella especially feels like an early internet dweller who is also a high-energy 14-year-old girl. I found the character a little annoying at first, but as the game kept getting more serious, it became a nice contrast to the cold main character, and their silly banter would be quite welcome. When it comes to the presentation, I was also pleasantly surprised by the soundtrack. For the most part, it has some fairly chill beats, and it makes perfect sense for a slow, puzzle-focused game. However, the game does have some intense electronic jams, and I couldn't help but bob my head to them the moment they start playing. When it comes to the gameplay, the very start feels a little confusing, and it makes complete sense, because the main character is stranded and equally as confused. Things quickly start making sense though. Most of the time in the game is spent on this computer interface that is used to look up all sorts of text logs and information on fish. The main recurring puzzle is actually completely fish-based.
Le fish au chocolat.
In hindsight, it's pretty straightforward, but it took me some time to get completely comfortable with the system. First, you need to find equations for luring fish. They're really just elementary school math problems, but they got me writing and filling things out on paper as I was playing. When you figure out those equations, you can execute them in this fish bait device and lure new fish that you can then scan and add to your logs. All the fish have their own code names and sequences that can be used to unlock further information. I think Jotaro Kujo would love this stuff. The rest of the puzzles would actually be pretty varied and original. Some you would have to intuitively solve on the spot, while others would have you referring back to the information on your computer. In a way, it reminded me of the gameplay in Flower, Sun and Rain. In both games you traverse the world using fairly stiff controls, interact with various people and objects, but when it comes to puzzles, the game would have you looking for clues in text files and filling out answers using a strange interfacing device that the protagonist always carries around. I personally rarely like puzzles in games, but Panthalassa was surprisingly enjoyable. If you ever played a point-and-click adventure before, you'll know how easy it can be to get stuck in them. So I was quite worried about my chances, since the game wasn't yet released and I couldn't get any outside help. But to my own surprise, I was able to figure out all the puzzles on my own. I don't want to see the game as straight up easy, because I can still see some people getting stuck. I was stumped at a few moments too, but it helps that the game is fairly small, so there's not that many different things you can even do, so it's not a huge issue tracking down the required clues for solving puzzles. I'd say it's a fairly relaxed experience that you can just unwind to while having a nice mug of tea, but it's still intellectually stimulating enough not to be dull. And if you still find yourself a little lost, aside from the usual companion, there's this unsavory fella who can give you some tips to set you back on track. In terms of my search for the weirdest games ever, Panthalassa is actually a wonderful contender. It strikes a great balance between being weird and original, but also remaining fun as a game. It might not be the weirdest thing I've seen, it's far from being as cryptic and bizarre as the aforementioned Eastern Mind, but it has a fair share of pretty strange moments, especially when it comes to some mixed media videos and such. They even sneaked in a little music video by a Portuguese punk band Triunfo Acéfalos. That's some really underground stuff I haven't heard of, but it's nice discovering new music. If you're talking about real music bands, I would strongly recommend Machine Grill's Reporpoise Fantasies EP to anyone who enjoyed Panthalassa, because it has a very similar theme and aesthetic. Coming back to the game itself, I really enjoyed how it's stylistically a pretty good throwback to those oddball, esoteric 90s games that would be really strange and uncanny. But in terms of gameplay and story, it's a fair bit more straightforward and palatable, that you don't really need to look up guides or those story explained videos, while also not being generic or shallow. So my verdict? Game good. And if I somehow manage to get this video out before the game is released, you can try the demo right now and add it to your wishlist if it looks like your kind of thing. The next game I've been sitting on since 2024 and kept meaning to talk about it, but just didn't find a good opportunity for it, since it's a bit small for a full-length review. That just shows how long some of my ideas take to come to fruition. I've been a fan of Daveki Studio since the very beginning, so that makes it almost 10 years now. It's an indie studio that specializes in dark, supernatural FMV mysteries with a dash of British humor. The bulk of their catalog consists of entirely FMV games that essentially function as choose-your-own-adventure type stories. Apparently, their first game, The Infectious Madness of Dr. Decker, has won a Guinness World Record for the most full-motion video in a video game. Future Dom here, with a quick interruption. I meant to put some visual of the record certificate here, but I actually can't find anything confirming this record aside from the claim on the developer's website. If anyone has more info about it, I'm very curious now, because this is either very poorly documented or it's a false claim. Besides, I'm pretty sure the record has been beaten since 2017. Murderous Muses, however, is a slight deviation from their tried and trusted formula. For the first time, the game takes place in a 3D CGI environment, and functions quite differently mechanically, which was seemingly a bit off-putting to a lot of fans, judging by the mixed Steam reviews. I wasn't too eager about the game looking at the graphics either, because they look like something out of the early 2000s, and more in a cheap than artistically deliberate way. But worry not, this is a certified Daveki game. It still has tons of FMV scenes, some recurring actors like their games tend to do, and references to their previous games despite this one being in a different universe. To sum the game up in one sentence, Murderous Muses is essentially Night at the Museum, but instead it's paintings coming alive at a gallery. Speaking of, is it just me, or does Ben Stiller have pretty much the same face as Alice Cooper? Every time I see Alice Cooper I just see Ben Stiller wearing makeup. Anyway, the player takes the role of a security guard in a small town's gallery. During the day, the player can arrange some of the paintings and listen to the exposition to get some background lore about the town, but it's the night where the real interesting stuff happens. New rooms start opening up, and there are 6 portraits from a painter who was mysteriously murdered. Each of these 6 portrait subjects are suspects for the murder, and the player is able to see memories of their conversations with the painter through the paintings. It's quite an interesting system. The game takes course over 3 days. Each night a new room opens, and each room corresponds to a single piece of evidence. The main goal in each room is to uncover the police interviews that confirm or deny the subject's alibi concerning the piece of evidence. To uncover these interviews, the player needs to play 3 memories from each painting in a certain sequence. Each time a memory is played, the painting slot cycles to a different topic in a certain order, so the memories have to be played in as efficient an order as possible, because each painting only has 6 plays per night. If you're in a tight spot, you can sacrifice 2 views from one painting to transplant them into one view for a different painting. Or if you're feeling confident, you can just save them for the next night. The first night is pretty straightforward, but each subsequent day the player has to choose a painting to give away, meaning that they won't be able to question it that night, and it can lead to missing some vital clues. Dang, it feels like I'm reading out those convoluted tabletop game rules that feel incomprehensible prior to playing the game, but I promise, this makes sense. In addition to all that, there are secrets hidden throughout the gallery and puzzle minigames that might unlock more story. The minigames are really basic though. While guessing the killer correctly is the main goal of the game, it is far from the full picture. While something like the shape-shifting detective did have different killers per playthrough, the Daveki games would usually be linear. Meanwhile, Murderous Muses is their most experimental game, not only in terms of visual presentation and gameplay, but also storytelling. It's almost like a detective puzzle-based roguelike. The main goal each playthrough is finding the killer. That's like defeating the last boss, but there's a bigger story to unlock, and it's impossible to do in a single playthrough. The game is meant to be played over and over again to unlock new bits of story, and it keeps things fresh relatively well. Each playthrough, the 3 pieces of evidence, as well as the conversation topics, are randomized, and not all of them are available in a single run. So the player is bound to find out new information about the characters with each playthrough. Each of the characters is a bit peculiar, and they have some dark story tied to them. The conversation topics needed to unlock the police interviews initially seem pretty random, but they eventually not only uncover the person's background, but also their possible motive to kill the painter. The painting sessions would have conversations that would be more reminiscent of what you'd hear in a psychologist's office, but Mordecai, the painter, is also really not a good person to trust with deep issues and sensitive secrets. So I would keep replaying the game session after session to satiate my curiosity about each of the characters' full story. Each one of them would tell an individual horror story, and some of them might even be interlinked with one another. But there's really layers to this. There's some truly weird stuff going on in the town, and Mordecai is deeply involved in it, so you can try to uncover the real motives of Mordecai antagonizing his painting subjects to the point where they might turn to murder. Some of it can be gathered from the overall lore in the regular painting exhibition, some of it can be deducted from the memories in the paintings, but by solving the minigame puzzles, You also unlock these urns that can be used to get information about the deeper overall mystery. So I'd say that even though some of the writing can be a bit cheesy, that's part of the charm in Devek games. And while the individual parts are nothing too crazy, it's really interesting how they all connect in the full picture. If I said Panthalassa doesn't need any story explanations, I feel like it would be nice for someone to make a full story summary of Murderous Muses to see how all of the small bits connect. It would kind of defeat the whole point of the game, uncovering the whole mystery, but if you're playing it with extended pauses in between sessions, it can be easy to forget some of the minor details. I guess I could take up that endeavor, but only if there's a significant interest in it from you, the viewers. In terms of gameplay, it's a bit of a mixed bag. I mostly liked it, and I thought the main puzzle mechanic was pretty interesting and original. I took my sweet time on my first playthrough, but each subsequent playthrough conveniently becomes shorter as more and more information gets unlocked because you can just skip the repeats. On the other hand, while the story is captivating, the gameplay can be a bit tedious, especially as you unlock more rooms, because you have to keep walking back and forth to refer what information you need to unlock for each of the portraits, and after several first attempts the minigames become more of a chore. I guess it could have been just a regular FMV game like the others, with all the navigation being replaced by regular menus, but I think that would be a lot more dull. But hey, I'm all about jank, so some minor gameplay inconveniences don't bother me if the rest of the game is compelling, and Murderous Muses certainly is. And in terms of my search for the weirdest games, Murderous Muses is far from the weirdest thing I've seen both in terms of story and the presentation, but the idea behind the game is very unique, and it was a joy for me as a fan of dark mysteries and FMV games. Also, a sequel to Dr. Decker is coming out soon, so I'm stoked for that. I usually wait for games to come out fully to cover them in videos, but I've been dying to try the GOB demo, because right from the moment I saw it, I knew it would be right up my alley. It's a retro-stylized claymation adventure, and it positively reeks of late 90s point and clicks. It's nasty and dirty, the graphics are crunchy and compressed, and yet the main character is an adorable little punk. When you start the game, you find yourself in an absolute mess of an apartment, and are given absolutely no context on what to do or how to do things. That's some classic 90s video gaming. After interacting with some stuff, you can find some items to pick up, and the puzzles in the game are mainly item focused. Panthalassa and Murderous Muses were both puzzle focused games, and I needed no guides for them. Yet when it came to GOB, I found myself stuck even during its brief 15-minute runtime. It just has my old weaknesses of items being well hidden in cluttered backgrounds, and also having to combine items when the game doesn't even really explain that you can do that. I guess you can look up the controls on the cute little phone menu, but even those were cryptic enough for me not to immediately figure out that combining items is a thing. It's pretty interesting how you can only carry 2 items at a time, one in each hand. Surprisingly, this game is probably better played with a controller, because moving at a certain angles is pretty clunky using a keyboard. But yeah, the real attraction of this game is the presentation. I was already in when I saw that this would be claymation, but when I got deeper into the game and saw all the dark sewers full of graffiti and piles of rusty and molded pixelated trash, I knew I was home. It's all very detailed and lovingly handcrafted. Funnily enough, it gave me the vibes of Augie and the Cockroaches, but crossed with an abandoned Soviet garage and multiplied by 100. Big grunge rock mood. I've been into this grimy, run-down urban aesthetic since forever ago, and it mostly used to be prevalent in late 90s games like Bad Mojo. My fix for the last several years was the Super Seuss channel. Those guys were up to some really funky stuff, exploring sewers and all sorts of abandoned buildings, even going to Pripyat multiple times. Shame they stopped doing English subtitles in favor of YouTube's AI dubbing. It just kills the entire vibe, and the translation isn't even good.
fecal masses of sausage.
There's not that much I can show or tell about Gob just yet, but so far it feels that it could be up there with other great adventures like Summerost or The Neverhood once it's done. It's just a little concerning that the game hasn't been updated since 2022, and the developer only tweets once a year, the last tweet being from 2024. I really hope this game gets finished, because I absolutely want to play more of it. Since this game was so short, I have another one to finish this video off with. It's an even shorter one. Basically, I saw clips of this online and it looked insane. A Fly in the Array is a small browser-based game and it captures the spirit of those bizarre flash games I'd play as a kid. You basically play as a fly, and I like my insect-based games. You go around and throw battle axes at slugs and stuff while avoiding green goo and pushing sneakers around. It's certainly a game of all time. I guess I can appreciate the human touch and the photographic textures, but man, I don't know if I can call this a game or even an artwork. I'd be listening to this 3-second loop of a person imitating a fly noise throughout the whole game and think, what the fuck am I playing? I could dig the vibe if the game was longer and had more substance, but as it is, it feels like someone's first attempt at making a game and just throwing whatever bullshit together to figure out how things work. Yet, it isn't. The dev has more games on itch.io, and I assume all of them are equally as strange browser-based experiences. Oh, and you know what's the reward for beating the game? You get to hear someone play the guitar for the first time in their life. What a valuable and unique experience. Yeah, this is one of those games in this series that is absolutely bewildering, but it's barely a game. And those are the games for this time. We've had both certified "what the fuck is this" moments, and some genuinely compelling games with interesting twists to them. I'm starting to think I should make a tier list of all the weird games I've tried so far, but that's kinda slop content. If you know of any games that would fit my search for the weirdest, let me know in the comment section. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in another video.